Vanessa Reynolds tapped her manicured nails against the steering wheel of her silver BMW as she waited for the officer to finish writing her ticket. Through her rearview mirror, she watched him approach, his face hidden beneath the brim of his hat. The morning sun glinted off his badge as he handed the slip of paper through her window. "This is your third speeding violation in 6 months, ma'am. I strongly suggest you appear in court for this one. Judge Wilson doesn't look kindly on repeat offenders." Vanessa barely glanced at the ticket before tucking it into her purse. "Thank you, officer. I'll be sure to take care of it." Her voice was honey-sweet, the same tone she used when telling troublesome employees that she'd consider their feedback. As soon as the patrol car pulled away, her smile vanished. "Ridiculous," she muttered, checking her watch. The stop had made her 10 minutes late for her morning meeting. She pressed the accelerator, not enough to risk another ticket, but enough to make up some time. As Chief Marketing Officer at Pinnacle Solutions, Vanessa had spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder. She'd learned which rules mattered and which were merely suggestions for people less important than herself. Traffic laws, in her experience, fell firmly into the latter category. Her phone rang through the car's speakers. "Vanessa Reynolds," she answered, her voice crisp and professional. "Hey, it's Tom. Where are you?" "The team's waiting in the conference room. Traffic stop. Some cop with nothing better to do." She sighed dramatically. "I'll be there in 5. "Another ticket?" Tom sounded concerned rather than impressed. As her executive assistant for the past 3 years, he knew her habits well. "That's the 3rd one since spring." "And?" Vanessa changed lanes without signaling, cutting off a delivery truck that honked in protest. She ignored it. "Well, didn't you skip court for the last one too? The judge might not—" "Tom," she interrupted, "I pay you to manage my schedule, not lecture me on traffic court. If I wanted a lecture, I'd call my mother." The silence on the other end told her she'd been too harsh, but Vanessa didn't have time to worry about hurt feelings. The parking garage was just ahead, and she had a presentation to salvage. The day passed in a blur of meetings, calls, and the kind of office politics at which Vanessa excelled. By 6 that evening, she was in her corner office, jacket discarded over a chair, reviewing quarterly projections while the cleaning staff quietly worked around her. A knock at her door made her look up. Tom stood in the doorway, coat over his arm. "I'm heading out. Need anything before I go?" Vanessa shook her head, then remembered. "Actually, can you add a reminder to pay that stupid ticket? Sometime next week when things calm down." Tom hesitated. "The officer wrote on this one that you should appear in court." He approached her desk, pointing to the note scrawled at the bottom of the citation she'd tossed aside hours earlier. "Given your history, it might be best to show up this time." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Tom, do you have any idea what my hourly rate is? It makes absolutely no sense for me to waste half a day sitting in traffic court with people who can't afford to just pay the fine." "I understand that. But besides, court appearances are for people who want to fight their tickets. I'm going to pay it." She waved her hand dismissively. "Eventually." Tom looked unconvinced. "I had a friend who ignored a couple of tickets. Ended up with a suspended license. It was a huge hassle." "That's because your friend isn't me." Vanessa smiled thinly. "The system works differently when you know the right people. My college roommate's husband is the district attorney, for heaven's sake. Judge Wilson is known for being pretty strict about—" "Tom." Vanessa's tone made it clear the discussion was over. "Just set the reminder for next Thursday. I'll pay the fine online, and that'll be the end of it." After Tom left, Vanessa stared at the ticket. 3 speeding violations in 6 months did sound bad when he put it that way, but speed limits were so arbitrary. 75 felt exactly the same as 60 on the highway, and the morning commute moved at whatever pace the fastest cars said anyway. It wasn't like she was being reckless. She crumpled the ticket and tossed it toward her trash can. It bounced off the rim and landed on the floor. She left it there for the cleaning staff. 2 weeks later, Vanessa breezed through the lobby of her luxury apartment building, nodding absently to the doorman as she collected her mail. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor gave her just enough time to sort through the stack. Credit card offers, a charity request, and an official-looking envelope from the county court. Inside her apartment, she dropped her keys on the marble countertop and tore open the court letter. It was a formal notice that she had missed her mandatory court appearance 3 days ago. At the bottom was a warning that failure to respond within 15 days would result in additional penalties that could include license suspension or even a bench warrant. Vanessa snorted. Scare tactics, she said to the empty room, tossing the letter aside like junk mail. She poured herself a glass of Pinot Noir and carried it to her balcony. The city stretched out below, lights twinkling in the early evening darkness. From this height, traffic was just a ribbon of red and white, flowing like a river she could control with a wave of her hand. That's how Vanessa had always seen the world, laid out for her benefit, malleable to her will. Her phone buzzed. A text from Blake, a man she'd been seeing casually for a few months. Dinner at 8? Reservations at Emilio's. She texted back. Perfect. See you there. Vanessa took another sip of wine, watching a helicopter drift across the skyline. She'd grown up comfortable but not wealthy, the daughter of a high school principal and a nurse. Everything she had now she'd earned through determination and an uncanny ability to make people give her what she wanted. Traffic court simply didn't fit into her world. It was beneath her, a nuisance designed for ordinary people who didn't understand how to navigate systems of power. The next morning, she was in the middle of her team meeting when Tom slipped into the room and placed a yellow sticky note in front of her. It read, "Called about ticket. Fine doubled for no-show. Court clerk says Judge Wilson wants you to appear in person now." Vanessa barely paused in her critique of the latest campaign numbers, flipping the note over without reading it aloud. She'd deal with that later. Or better yet, have Tom deal with it. That's what she paid him for. After the meeting, she pulled Tom aside. "Call the court back. Tell them I'll pay the doubled fine, but I'm not coming in. Offer to send a check today." Tom looked uncomfortable. "I already tried that approach. The clerk was pretty clear that the judge has flagged your case specifically. Apparently he remembers your name from the previous tickets." A flicker of unease passed through Vanessa, but she pushed it aside. "Fine, who do we know at the courthouse? Someone must owe me a favor. Vanessa, I really think you should just go in. Take an hour, show some respect to the judge, pay the fine, and be done with it." She stared at him as if he'd suggested she fly to the moon. "I don't have time for this, Tom. Figure it out." She turned and walked away, already focusing on her next meeting. Later that afternoon, she stepped out of a client lunch to find 3 missed calls from Tom. Irritated, she called him back as she walked to her car. "What's so urgent?" she asked, fishing her keys from her purse. "I've been trying different angles with the court clerk," Tom said, his voice tight with stress. "She finally told me that Judge Wilson has personally reviewed your driving record. This isn't just about the current ticket anymore. He's concerned about the pattern. So what does that mean?" Vanessa unlocked her car and slid into the driver's seat. "It means you need to take this seriously. The clerk hinted that if you don't appear at the rescheduled hearing next week, the judge might issue a bench warrant." Vanessa laughed out loud. "A bench warrant? For speeding tickets? Don't be dramatic. I'm just telling you what she said." "Well, she's trying to scare you because that's her job." Vanessa started the engine. "Look, worst case, I'll have my lawyer friend Dale handle it. He can appear on my behalf." "I really don't think—" "Tom, I pay you to solve problems, not create them. Handle it." She ended the call before he could respond, then tossed her phone onto the passenger seat. As she pulled into traffic, she cranked up the music and pushed thoughts of judges and courtrooms from her mind. She had a company to run, a promotion to secure, and a life to live. Traffic court was simply not part of the equation. The world worked differently for people like Vanessa Reynolds. At least, that's what she had always believed. She had no idea how wrong she was about to discover she'd been. The morning sun cast long shadows across Vanessa's office as she reviewed the quarterly reports. Her coffee had gone cold, forgotten during an hour-long conference call with investors. A light knock on her door made her look up. "Come in," she called, minimizing the spreadsheet on her screen. Tom entered, looking more hesitant than usual. In his hand was another official-looking envelope. "This came certified mail. You need to sign for it." Vanessa's expression soured. "More court nonsense?" "I believe so." Tom placed the envelope on her desk and handed her a pen. "The courier is waiting for your signature." With an exaggerated sigh, Vanessa scrawled her name on the delivery confirmation. "This is getting ridiculous. Don't they have actual criminals to chase?" After Tom left with the signed form, Vanessa stared at the envelope for a long moment. Something about the bright red, urgent legal notice stamped across the front made her stomach tighten. She considered simply tossing it in her drawer and forgetting about it, but curiosity won out. The letter inside was printed on heavy paper with the county courthouse letterhead. Its message was brief but unmistakable. Her driver's license would be suspended in 10 days unless she appeared at a mandatory hearing. The date was set for the following Wednesday at 9 a.m. in Courtroom B, Judge Wilson presiding. Unbelievable, she muttered, crumpling the letter in her fist. She buzzed for Tom. He appeared within seconds as if he'd been waiting just outside. Yes, called Dale Miller. I need him to handle this court situation. She tossed the crumpled letter toward him. They're threatening to suspend my license now. It's absurd. Tom smoothed out the paper and read it quickly. Dale Miller? The corporate attorney. Yes, we play tennis at the same club. He owes me a favor. Tom looked uncertain. Vanessa, Dale handles mergers and acquisitions. This is traffic court. You might need someone with— Just call him, she snapped. Tell him I need this nuisance dealt with. As Tom left, Vanessa turned back to her computer, determined to focus on work rather than this irritating distraction. She had a major presentation for the board next week, and her team was still finalizing the projections for next year's marketing budget. A traffic court judge on a power trip was the last thing she needed. I'm sorry, but I can't help you with this. Dale's voice sounded tinny through the speakerphone in Vanessa's office later that afternoon. Traffic court isn't my area, and frankly, if Judge Wilson has personally flagged your case, you're going to want to take it seriously. Vanessa paced beside her desk. Come on, Dale, it's just a few speeding tickets. Surely you can make a call or file something to make this go away. It stopped being just a few speeding tickets when you ignored the court. Summons, twice, Dale's tone was that of a parent explaining something obvious to a stubborn child. Wilson has a reputation in the legal community. He believes traffic laws exist for public safety, not revenue collection. He takes repeat offenders very seriously. So what are you saying? I'm saying you should show up for your hearing, be respectful, and hope he doesn't make an example of you. Vanessa stopped pacing. Make an example of me? I'm the chief marketing officer of a Fortune 500 company. I don't have time for this nonsense. There was a pause on the line. Vanessa, with all due respect, that attitude is exactly what will get you into trouble in his courtroom. Judge Wilson doesn't care about corporate titles. In fact, he's known for being particularly hard on people who act entitled. This is ridiculous, she huffed. What's the worst that could happen, a fine? I'll just pay it. License suspension for starters, possibly community service. In extreme cases, he's even given people jail time for contempt if they're disrespectful in his court. Jail? Vanessa laughed, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. For speeding tickets? For repeatedly ignoring court orders, Dale corrected. Look, I can recommend a good traffic attorney if you want, but my advice? Show up yourself. Dress conservatively, be humble, and apologize for missing the previous hearings. It's your best shot. After hanging up, Vanessa stood at her office window staring out at the city below. The idea that she might actually have to appear in traffic court was slowly sinking in. It wasn't just the waste of time that bothered her, it was the principle. People like her didn't sit in crowded courtrooms with ordinary citizens. They made a phone call, paid a fine, and moved on with their important lives. The next morning, Vanessa was reviewing her email when Michael Chen from the legal department stopped by her office. She'd worked with him on several campaigns over the years and respected his straightforward approach. Tom mentioned you're having some trouble with traffic court, he said, leaning against her doorframe. I thought I might offer some perspective. Vanessa gestured for him to come in. Please tell me you know a way out of this mess. Michael sat down across from her. Before I joined Pinnacle, I practiced law for 10 years. Started in the DA's office, actually. So you know people who could help? Hope flickered in Vanessa's voice. He shook his head. That's not where I'm going with this. I've appeared before Judge Wilson many times. He's fair, but extremely strict about following the law to the letter. That's what Dale said too. Vanessa frowned. I don't understand why everyone's making such a big deal about this. They're just speeding tickets. It's not about the tickets anymore, Michael explained patiently. It's about your response to them. By ignoring the court dates, you've essentially told Judge Wilson that you don't think his courtroom deserves your time or attention. Well, it doesn't, Vanessa said bluntly. I have a company to help run. Michael's expression grew serious. Vanessa, I like you. We work well together. But I need to be very clear about something. That attitude will destroy you in Wilson's courtroom. For the first time, A flicker of genuine concern crossed Vanessa's face. So what do I do? Show up for the hearing. Dress like you're meeting the board. Be respectful, not just to the judge, but to everyone. The bailiffs, the clerks, the other defendants. Wilson notices that stuff. Michael leaned forward. And most importantly, when you address the court, be humble. Acknowledge that you were wrong to miss the previous hearings. Vanessa grimaced. That's not really my style. Then I suggest you develop a new style by next Wednesday. Michael stood to leave. Because Judge Wilson doesn't play games. If you go in there acting like the rules don't apply to you, he will make you regret it. After Michael left, Vanessa sat quietly, his words echoing in her mind. For the first time since this whole situation began, she felt a twinge of genuine worry. Both Dale and Michael, smart, accomplished professionals, had warned her about this judge. Maybe there was something to their concerns. She buzzed for Tom. Clear my schedule for next Wednesday morning. I have to go to this stupid hearing. The weekend passed too quickly, and by Tuesday afternoon, Vanessa found herself growing increasingly anxious about the hearing. She'd canceled her usual salon appointment, deciding that showing up with freshly highlighted hair and a manicure might send the wrong message. When Tom dropped off her mail, she noticed him eyeing her warily. What? She demanded. Nothing, he said quickly. I'm glad you're taking this seriously. Everyone keeps telling me I need to, so fine. I'll go sit in traffic court like a common speeder. She shuffled through the envelopes, but I'm not happy about it. Would it help if I went with you? For moral support? The offer surprised her. Don't you have work to do? Tom shrugged. I can reschedule some things. Besides, you've seemed stressed about it. Vanessa almost refused automatically. Showing vulnerability wasn't her style, but something stopped her. Actually, that would be helpful, thank you. That night, Vanessa lay awake, replaying the warnings from Dale and Michael. For the first time in years, she felt genuinely out of her depth. In the corporate world, she knew exactly how to navigate every situation. But courtrooms operated by different rules. Rules she'd never bothered to learn because she'd always assumed they didn't apply to her. What if they suspended her license? How would she get to work? The thought of using public transportation or relying on rideshare services made her cringe. And what would people think if they found out? The board was considering her for the COO position when Gregory retired next year. Would this affect their decision? As sleep finally overtook her, one thought kept circling. Maybe she'd been wrong to dismiss this so easily. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't above the court after all. Morning came too soon. Vanessa dressed carefully in a navy suit, conservative, professional, and slightly understated compared to her usual bold choices. She skipped her statement jewelry and opted for simple pearl earrings. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked humbled somehow. Tom was waiting in the lobby of her building, holding 2 cups of coffee. Ready? He asked, handing her one. Vanessa took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. What she didn't realize was that this was only the beginning. Judge Wilson was about to teach her a lesson she would never forget. The county courthouse loomed like a stone giant against the morning sky. Vanessa had driven past it hundreds of times but had never set foot inside. Now, as she and Tom approached the wide steps leading to the entrance, she felt unexpectedly small. Remember what Michael said? Tom murmured as they joined the line for security. Be respectful to everyone. Vanessa nodded, clutching her leather portfolio like a shield. Inside were copies of her tickets, the court notices, and her spotless driving record from before this recent spate of violations. She'd also brought a checkbook, assuming she could simply pay whatever fine they imposed and be on her way. The security line moved slowly. Around them, people from all walks of life waited their turn. A construction worker still in his boots and reflective vest, an elderly woman leaning on a cane, a young mother trying to quiet her fussy baby. Vanessa studied them discreetly, realizing she rarely interacted with such a diverse cross-section of society. When they finally reached the front, Vanessa placed her purse and portfolio on the conveyor belt and walked through the metal detector. The security guard, a heavy-set man with kind eyes, gave her a polite nod. Courtroom B is on the 2nd floor, ma'am. Take the elevator on your right. Thank you, she replied. Surprised he knew where she was headed. As if reading her mind, the guard added, Wednesday mornings are always Judge Wilson's traffic court. The elevator was crowded. Forcing Vanessa closer to Tom than she would have preferred, she caught a whiff of someone's too strong cologne and tried not to wrinkle her nose. When the doors opened on the second floor, they followed the stream of people down a long hallway with wooden benches lining the walls. Every bench was occupied and more people stood in clusters speaking in hushed tones. "There must be 50 people here," Vanessa whispered to Tom. "How long is this going to take?" Before he could answer, a court officer appeared at the end of the hall. "All those here for traffic court, please enter courtroom B and find a seat. Court will begin promptly at 9. The crowd began to move. Vanessa and Tom joined the slow procession into the courtroom, which was larger than she'd expected but still not big enough for the morning's caseload. They managed to find seats in the third row, sandwiched between a college-aged boy who kept bouncing his knee nervously and a middle-aged woman frantically reviewing what looked like a hastily prepared statement. "All rise." The command came suddenly, startling Vanessa. Everyone around her stood as a side door opened and the judge entered. Judge Wilson was not what Vanessa had expected. She'd imagined an older man, perhaps white-haired and stern like the judges on television. Instead, Judge Wilson was a black woman in her 50s, with close-cropped gray hair and rectangular glasses that gave her an owlish appearance. She moved with purposeful efficiency to the bench and nodded to the room. "Be seated," she instructed, her voice carrying easily without seeming loud. "Good morning, everyone. This is the Wednesday traffic court session. We have a full docket today, so we'll proceed efficiently." She shuffled some papers, then looked up at the room. "Before we begin calling cases, let me remind everyone of the basic rules in my courtroom. First, when your name is called, come forward promptly. Second, address the court as Your Honor. Third, speak clearly and directly, no excuses, just facts. And finally, remember that traffic laws exist to keep our community safe, not to inconvenience you personally." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. Judge Wilson did not smile, but her expression wasn't unkind either. "Let's begin. Bailiff, call the first case." What followed was a procession of cases: speeding tickets, rolling stops, expired registrations, driving without insurance. Judge Wilson handled each one with the same direct efficiency, listening carefully, asking pointed questions, and rendering decisions without hesitation. Some people left with reduced fines, others with community service, and a few with the exact penalties they'd been trying to avoid. Vanessa watched it all with growing unease. The judge seemed to have an uncanny ability to see through people's excuses. When a well-dressed businessman tried to explain that he was too busy with important clients to renew his vehicle registration, Judge Wilson had fixed him with a look that made him actually take a step backward. "Mr. Peterson," she'd said calmly, "are your clients more important than the laws that keep our roads safe for everyone? Because if that's your position, I'd be happy to explain the error in your thinking during the 40 hours of community service you'll be performing." The businessman had quickly changed his tune. As case after case was called, Vanessa's name remained unspoken. By 11 o'clock, she was shifting uncomfortably in her seat. The wooden bench had grown painfully hard, and she was missing an important strategy meeting. She leaned toward Tom. "How much longer?" she whispered. He shrugged. "Could be hours. Traffic court often goes all day." Vanessa stifled a groan. This was exactly why she'd avoided coming in the first place. What a colossal waste of time. Another hour crawled by. The crowd in the courtroom had thinned considerably, but still Vanessa waited. Her phone vibrated in her purse, probably someone from work wondering where she was. She ignored it. Judge Wilson had made it very clear that cell phones were not to be used in her courtroom. Finally, just after noon, Vanessa Reynolds. Vanessa's head snapped up. She gathered her portfolio and stood, momentarily lightheaded from sitting so long. Tom gave her arm a reassuring squeeze as she made her way to the front of the courtroom. The bailiff directed her to stand behind a small podium facing the judge's bench. Judge Wilson didn't look up immediately, instead reviewing what Vanessa assumed was her case file. The silence stretched uncomfortably. When the judge finally raised her eyes, her gaze was penetrating. "Ms. Reynolds, you're here on 3 speeding violations over a 6-month period, all on the same stretch of highway. Additionally, you failed to appear for 2 previously scheduled court dates. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." Vanessa's mouth felt dry. "And why did you miss those court dates, Ms. Reynolds?" This was the moment Michael had prepared her for. "Be humble," he'd said. "Acknowledge your mistake. Vanessa took a deep breath. I was busy with work commitments, Your Honor. I should have prioritized the court appearances, and I apologize for not doing so. Judge Wilson's expression didn't change. Work commitments? I see. She glanced down at the file again. According to this, you're the Chief Marketing Officer at Pinnacle Solutions. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. A significant position, I imagine. Lots of responsibilities. People counting on you. Yes, that's right. Vanessa felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the judge was going to be understanding after all. Tell me, Ms. Reynolds, in your role at Pinnacle, do you expect your employees to follow company policies? The question caught Vanessa off guard. Of course, Your Honor. And if someone repeatedly ignored those policies because they were busy with other commitments, how would you respond? Vanessa hesitated. I would remind them of the importance of those policies. Just a reminder. After 3 violations? Judge Wilson raised an eyebrow. Be honest, Ms. Reynolds, Vanessa swallowed hard. I would probably put them on probation. I see. Judge Wilson leaned back slightly. So you expect your employees to prioritize your company's rules, but you don't feel the need to prioritize the laws of this county. Is that an accurate assessment? No, Your Honor, that's not. Vanessa stopped herself, recognizing the trap. I understand your point. The judge studied her for a long moment. Do you? Because your actions suggest otherwise. Speeding isn't just breaking a rule, Ms. Reynolds, it's putting lives at risk, including your own. Before Vanessa could respond, the courtroom door opened. A uniformed police officer entered and approached the bailiff, handing him a slip of paper. The bailiff, in turn, brought it to Judge Wilson. She read it quickly, her expression hardening. Ms. Reynolds, it appears we have another matter to discuss. Judge Wilson held up the paper. According to Officer Liu, your vehicle was observed rolling through a stop sign this morning just 3 blocks from this courthouse. The officer ran your license plate and discovered your bench warrant, which is why you're here today. Vanessa felt the blood drain from her face. In her rush to get to court on time, she had barely paused at the stop sign near the parking garage. She hadn't even noticed a police car. The officer was going to arrest you on the spot, but when he learned you were headed to court, he decided to inform me instead. Judge Wilson's voice had grown cooler. So it seems that even on your way to face consequences for breaking traffic laws, you couldn't be bothered to follow them. The courtroom had gone very quiet. Vanessa was acutely aware of the few remaining spectators watching this unfold. Somewhere behind her, she knew Tom was witnessing her humiliation. Your Honor, I can explain. Ms. Reynolds. Judge Wilson's voice cut through her words like a knife. I don't think you can explain. I think you've demonstrated a pattern of behavior that suggests you believe yourself to be above the law. And that is something I cannot and will not tolerate in my courtroom. Vanessa's legs felt weak beneath her. This was not going at all how she had planned. We'll take a 30-minute recess for lunch, Judge Wilson announced to the room. When we return, we'll continue with Ms. Reynolds' case and determine an appropriate response to her continued disregard for the law. As Judge Wilson stood, everyone in the courtroom rose. She exited through the side door, leaving Vanessa standing alone at the podium, facing a punishment she was suddenly very afraid to hear. Vanessa couldn't eat. The courthouse cafeteria buzzed with conversation around her, but she just stared at the untouched sandwich Tom had bought for her. Her stomach had twisted itself into a knot that seemed to tighten with each passing minute. You should try to eat something, Tom suggested gently. We don't know how long the afternoon session will go. She pushed the sandwich away. Did you see how she looked at me? Like I was some kind of criminal. You're not a criminal, Tom assured her. You just made some mistakes. Mistakes that might cost me my license. Vanessa rubbed her temples. What was I thinking? I should have just paid the tickets and shown up the first time. Tom checked his watch. We should head back. You don't want to be late returning from recess. The walk back to courtroom B felt like a march to the gallows. Vanessa's designer heels, usually a source of confidence, now pinched her feet painfully. Her tailored suit felt too tight across her shoulders. Even her pearl earrings seemed to weigh heavily against her neck. They settled back into their seats just as the bailiff called for everyone to rise. Judge Wilson returned, her expression unreadable as she took her place at the bench. Before we continue with Ms. Reynolds' case, the judge announced, I'll handle a few brief matters. Vanessa exhaled slowly. A temporary reprieve. She watched as Judge Wilson efficiently disposed of 3 minor cases: a teenager with an expired learner's permit, an elderly man who'd accidentally parked in a loading zone, and a woman who'd been ticketed for a broken taillight she'd already fixed. The judge was firm but fair with each of them, reducing fines where appropriate and explaining her decisions clearly. Then, all too soon, "Ms. Reynolds, please approach the bench again." Vanessa's legs felt like lead as she made her way forward. The podium seemed smaller this time, offering no protection from the judge's scrutiny. "Ms. Reynolds, during our break, I reviewed your entire driving record." Judge Wilson adjusted her glasses. "Prior to these recent incidents, you had a clean history. That suggests to me that something has changed in the past 6 months. Would you care to explain?" Vanessa hadn't expected this opening. She'd prepared for a lecture, not a question. I've been under a lot of pressure at work," she began hesitantly. "We're launching a major new product line, and I'm being considered for a promotion to COO. The hours have been long, and I'm often rushing to meetings." "I see." Judge Wilson made a note. "And do you believe these professional pressures justify endangering others on the road?" "No, Your Honor, of course not." "Then why did you continue to speed even after receiving citations?" Vanessa swallowed hard. The honest answer, because she didn't think the rules applied to someone as important as her, would sound terrible. But lying to the judge seemed even worse, I think. "I convinced myself that my time was more valuable than a few miles per hour over the limit," she admitted. "I know that sounds awful." To her surprise, Judge Wilson nodded. "It does sound awful, but I appreciate your honesty. Many people who stand where you're standing never reach that level of self-awareness." A tiny flicker of hope sparked in Vanessa's chest. "However," Judge Wilson continued, extinguishing that spark instantly, "self-awareness doesn't excuse your actions, particularly your decision to ignore 2 court orders and your continued disregard for traffic laws even on your way to this hearing." "I understand, Your Honor." "Do you?" Judge Wilson leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Reynolds, in your professional life you're accustomed to being respected and obeyed. You give orders and people follow them. That creates a certain mindset, one that can make it difficult to remember that outside your office, you're subject to the same rules as everyone else." Vanessa remained silent, recognizing the truth in the judge's words. "I've seen many people like you in my courtroom," Judge Wilson continued. "Successful, busy professionals who gradually come to believe that their importance exempts them from ordinary constraints. It's a dangerous attitude both for them and for society." She paused, studying Vanessa's face. "The purpose of this court isn't just to collect fines, Ms. Reynolds. It's to correct behavior that puts our community at risk. In your case, I believe that requires more than a monetary penalty." Vanessa's mouth went dry. "What do you mean, Your Honor?" "I'm sentencing you to a fine of $1,000 for each speeding violation, plus an additional $500 for each missed court date. That's a total of $4,000. Judge Wilson made another note in the file. "Additionally, you'll complete a defensive driving course, the full weekend program, not the online version." Vanessa nodded quickly. The money meant nothing to her, and a weekend course was inconvenient but manageable. If that was all, and finally, Judge Wilson continued, "you'll perform 40 hours of community service with the County Transportation Safety Program." 40 hours? Vanessa couldn't keep the dismay from her voice. "Your Honor, with my work schedule, that would be very difficult to—" "Ms. Reynolds." Judge Wilson's tone stopped her mid-sentence. "Would you prefer I suspend your license instead? Because that's the alternative." "No, Your Honor. 40 hours is fine." "I thought it might be." There was the faintest hint of a smile on Judge Wilson's face. "The community service will involve directing traffic at school crossings during morning and afternoon hours. You'll wear a safety vest and help ensure children can cross streets safely. Streets where people like you often speed without considering the consequences." The image of herself in a neon vest, standing at a crosswalk while her colleagues drove by, made Vanessa wince internally. It would be humiliating. "You'll report to Transportation Safety Officer Rivera tomorrow morning at 7:30 for orientation," Judge Wilson continued. "The court clerk will provide you with the address and necessary paperwork before you leave today." Vanessa nodded mutely. "One final thing. Ms. Reynolds." Judge Wilson removed her glasses and looked directly at Vanessa. "During your community service, I expect you to observe all traffic laws meticulously. If you receive even one more citation while completing your sentence, You'll be back in my courtroom and I will suspend your license. Is that clear? Perfectly clear, Your Honor. Good. Judge Wilson replaced her glasses. Pay the fine on your way out today. The clerk will help you schedule your defensive driving course. She struck her gavel once. Next case. Dismissed, Vanessa turned and walked back to where Tom waited. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she felt the eyes of the remaining people in the courtroom following her. Tom mercifully said nothing as they gathered their things and exited into the hallway. Well, that could have been worse, he finally ventured as they waited at the clerk's window. 40 hours of community service directing traffic? Vanessa hissed. In a vest? Where people from work might see me. How exactly could it be worse? She could have suspended your license, Tom reminded her. Or given you jail time for contempt. Michael said that was a possibility. Vanessa fell silent, acknowledging the truth in his words. As humiliating as the sentence was, it could indeed have been much worse. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with a kind face, processed Vanessa's paperwork efficiently. The defensive driving course is offered the first weekend of every month, she explained. The next one starts this Saturday at 8 a.m. This Saturday? Vanessa had plans to play tennis with a potential client. Is there any way I could start next month instead? The clerk glanced over Vanessa's shoulder. Following her gaze, Vanessa turned to see Judge Wilson standing nearby, apparently discussing another case with the bailiff. The judge wasn't looking their way, but her presence was enough. This Saturday will be fine, Vanessa said quickly, turning back to the clerk. Good choice, the clerk murmured, stamping the form. Judge Wilson has a sixth sense about people trying to delay their sentences. She handed Vanessa a packet of papers. Everything you need to know is in here. The address for tomorrow morning, the schedule for your defensive driving course, and contact information for Officer Rivera, who will be supervising your community service. Vanessa accepted the packet, writing a check for the $4,000 fine without comment. The amount was insignificant to her financially, but the sting to her pride was enormous. As she and Tom walked toward the courthouse exit, Vanessa spotted a familiar face. The businessman who had been reprimanded earlier for claiming he was too busy for vehicle registration. He was sitting on a bench filling out paperwork with a resigned expression. Their eyes met briefly, and something like recognition passed between them, a shared understanding of having been humbled by the same force. Outside, the afternoon sun seemed unnecessarily bright. Vanessa squinted against it, feeling strangely disoriented, as if the world had shifted slightly on its axis while she was in the courtroom. Do you want me to drive? Tom offered, gesturing toward her car in the parking garage. No. Vanessa took a deep breath. But thank you for everything today. Tom nodded, understanding the effort it took for her to express gratitude. As they approached her BMW, Vanessa found herself checking the speedometer constantly as she pulled out of the garage. At the stop sign, the very one she'd rolled through that morning, she came to a complete halt, counting a full 3 seconds before proceeding. The drive back to the office was silent, Vanessa's mind racing with thoughts of how she would explain her community service hours to her colleagues, how she would rearrange her schedule to accommodate the defensive driving course, and, most troublingly, how she had so completely misjudged her position in the world. For the first time in years, Vanessa Reynolds felt genuinely humbled. And somewhere deep inside, past the embarrassment and inconvenience, was the uncomfortable recognition that perhaps Judge Wilson had seen something in her that needed correction. Not just her driving, but her perspective. The neon yellow safety vest was somehow both too tight and too loose at the same time. Vanessa tugged at it uncomfortably as she stood at the busy intersection near Lincoln Elementary School, her clipboard clutched in one hand, a stop sign paddle in the other. The morning sun had barely risen, but already sweat beaded on her forehead. Remember, Officer Rivera had instructed during yesterday's orientation, your job is to ensure the children cross safely. Make eye contact with drivers. Be assertive but not aggressive. The lives of these kids are in your hands. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on Vanessa as she surveyed the growing line of cars approaching the crosswalk. Parents dropping off their children, commuters rushing to work, delivery trucks making morning rounds, all of them in a hurry. Just like she always was. A small group of children approached the corner, backpacks bouncing as they chatted among themselves. Vanessa raised her stop sign, stepped into the street, and held up her other hand toward the line of cars. Most stopped immediately, but one silver SUV inched forward impatiently. Vanessa locked eyes with the driver, a woman about her age wearing a business suit similar to ones in Vanessa's own closet. The woman glanced at her watch, then revved her engine slightly, clearly communicating her impatience. 3 days ago, Vanessa would have sympathized with the driver. Now, with children waiting to cross, she felt a surprising surge of protectiveness. She held the stop sign higher and stared the woman down until she finally sighed and settled back in her seat. "Okay, you can cross now," Vanessa called to the children, maintaining her position in the center of the crosswalk as they passed. One little boy with untied shoelaces smiled up at her. "Thank you, crossing lady." Something about his simple gratitude touched her unexpectedly. "You're welcome," she replied. "Tie your shoes when you get to the other side, okay?" The boy nodded earnestly before running to catch up with his friends. Vanessa turned back to face the waiting cars, feeling strangely satisfied as she waved them forward after the children were safely across. By the end of her 2-hour morning shift, Vanessa had helped dozens of children navigate the busy intersection. Her feet ached, and her arm was tired from holding the stop sign, but she felt oddly accomplished. This wasn't the kind of achievement she usually valued. There was no promotion on the line, no bonus to be earned, yet it felt meaningful in a way she hadn't anticipated. As she returned her equipment to Officer Rivera's van, he handed her a water bottle. "Good job today, Reynolds. You've got a natural authority. Drivers listen to you." "Thanks," she said, surprised by how much the simple compliment pleased her. "It was interesting. Most people find it eye-opening," Rivera commented, making a note on his clipboard. "Seeing traffic from this perspective changes how you think about driving." Vanessa nodded, realizing he was right. She'd never really considered what it was like to be a crossing guard, a pedestrian, or a parent watching their child navigate busy streets. Her focus had always been on getting where she needed to go as quickly as possible. "You're scheduled for afternoon shift as well, right?" Rivera checked his list. 3 to 5 p.m. Don't be late, that's when the kids are tired and less careful. The defensive driving course that weekend was even worse than Vanessa had imagined. Held in a dreary community center classroom with uncomfortable plastic chairs, it was populated by a mix of traffic offenders like herself and teenagers earning their first licenses. The instructor, a retired police officer named Wilson, no relation to the judge, he joked, though no one laughed, had a monotonous voice and a seemingly endless supply of gruesome accident statistics. "Speed kills," he repeated throughout the 2-day course. "Every 5 miles per hour over the limit increases your risk of a fatal accident by nearly 8%. Vanessa found herself taking notes despite her initial determination to merely endure the class. The numbers were sobering. The videos of real accidents were worse. By Sunday afternoon, she felt genuinely shaken by how cavalierly she'd treated speed limits. During one break, she found herself chatting with a young man who'd received a ticket for texting while driving. "I just didn't think it was that big a deal," he admitted. "Everyone does it, you know." "I used to think the same way about speeding," Vanessa replied, surprising herself with her candor. "But when you see the statistics..." "Yeah," he nodded. That video they showed about reaction time was pretty intense. 3 seconds looking at your phone at highway speed is like driving the length of a football field blindfolded. "Exactly." Vanessa sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "And for what? To read a text that could wait 5 minutes until you're parked?" She returned to her seat for the final session, reflecting on how quickly her perspective had shifted. Just a week ago, she would have dismissed this entire course as a waste of time. Now she found herself genuinely absorbing the information, reconsidering habits she'd never questioned before. Over the following weeks, Vanessa settled into a routine. 3 mornings and 2 afternoons each week, she donned the yellow vest and helped children cross the street. The other hours of her community service were spent placing speed monitor signs around the county, the kind that displayed drivers' speeds compared to the posted limit, with flashing lights for violators. Between these assignments and her regular work schedule, Vanessa was exhausted. She'd had to reschedule client meetings, delegate projects to her team, and explain her frequent absences to curious colleagues. She decided on a version of the truth. "I'm doing community service with the Transportation Safety Program." It's been quite educational. What she didn't mention was that it was court-ordered. Yet somehow the gossip had spread. She occasionally caught whispers as she passed the break room, or noticed conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered. It was humbling, but not as devastating as she might have expected. One Thursday afternoon, as Vanessa was setting up a speed monitor on a residential street, a familiar black Mercedes pulled alongside her. The window rolled down to reveal Gregory Wells, the company's CEO, and the man who would decide whether she got the COO position. "Vanessa," he called, clearly surprised to see her in a safety vest by the roadside. "What are you doing out here?" Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she straightened her shoulders. "Community service, sir. Court ordered after some speeding tickets." She waited for his disapproval, but instead he simply nodded. "Judge Wilson?" Vanessa blinked in surprise. "Yes, actually. How did you know?" "She got me too about 5 years ago," Gregory chuckled. "Ran a red light while I was on a conference call. Thought I was too important to stop. Spent 30 hours picking up litter along the highway as a result." "You're kidding." Vanessa couldn't hide her astonishment. "Nope. Best thing that could have happened to me, though I didn't think so at the time." He glanced at his speedometer, then back at her. "How many hours do you have left?" "Today's my last day, actually. I've got about 3 hours to go." Gregory nodded thoughtfully. "Well, finish strong. We'll talk when you're back in the office tomorrow. I'm interested to hear what you've learned from all this." As he drove away, precisely at the speed limit, Vanessa noticed, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Maybe this experience wouldn't derail her career after all. Maybe in some strange way it might even help. On her final afternoon as a crossing guard, Vanessa found herself feeling unexpectedly emotional. She'd come to know many of the children by name. There was Tyler with his perpetually untied shoelaces, Lily who always thanked her with a little curtsy, and the Chen twins who raced each other to the corner every day. "It's your last day, isn't it?" Officer Rivera asked as he handed her the stop sign. Vanessa nodded. "Hard to believe it's been 40 hours already." "Time flies when you're having fun," he joked, then grew more serious. "You know, most people who come through this program just go through the motions. They're angry about being here and they never really get the point." "And what is the point exactly?" Vanessa asked. Rivera gestured toward the intersection. "That none of us is more important than the safety of others. That the rules apply to everyone, regardless of who they are or where they're going. That sometimes slowing down is the most important thing you can do." As the children began to arrive for the afternoon crossing, Vanessa reflected on his words. 6 weeks ago, she would have dismissed them as simplistic. Now she recognized the wisdom in them. The next morning, Vanessa drove to the courthouse for her final meeting with the court clerk to certify that she'd completed all requirements of her sentence. As she approached the building, she slowed for a yellow light she once would have accelerated through. The courthouse no longer seemed imposing, just another important institution in a community she was gradually seeing with new eyes. Inside, she was surprised to find Judge Wilson in the clerk's office reviewing some paperwork. The judge looked up as Vanessa entered. "Ms. Reynolds, completing your service today?" "Yes, Your Honor." Vanessa handed her signed forms to the clerk. "All 40 hours plus the defensive driving course. And what did you think of the experience?" The judge's expression was neutral, but her eyes were keen with interest. Vanessa considered her answer carefully. "It was illuminating. I've spent years focused on my career, my time, my priorities. Standing at that crosswalk forced me to see things differently, to recognize that my convenience isn't more important than someone else's safety." Judge Wilson nodded slowly. "That's precisely the lesson I hoped you'd learn." She glanced at the clerk, who nodded confirmation that all paperwork was in order. "Your case is now closed, Ms. Reynolds. I trust we won't see you in my courtroom again."